and this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute financial advice. Please consult with a qualified financial professional for advice specific to your situation. The views and opinions expressed are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect those of the podcast producers or sponsors. We make no representations or warranties regarding the accuracy or completeness of the content. Hi, my name is Bella Carrasco, and helping others feel more comfortable about investing brings a huge smile to my face. After working in the private equity, family office, and securities markets for nearly a decade, I pulled together my resources to interview experts in each area of the due diligence process and answer how do you know questions when considering your future financial safety. We go deep into questions about many phases of the investment process, with the goal of helping you go from practice to game time confidently. This is the How Do You Know podcast. Today, we are speaking with the founder of Rise Investments, VinceDeCrow. Rise is a registered investment advisor that provides wealth management services to its clients, including financial planning and tailored investment management solutions. Vince, I want to get into Rise later, but first, thank you for being here and would love to just start with what is a financial plan and what does it entail?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Bella. I'm glad to be here. So a personal financial plan is a written roadmap that guides an individual or family on steps to take to most optimally manage their money and finances in order to achieve their specific life and financial goals. They take into account one's entire financial picture and circumstances to help them achieve an endless array of objectives or goals. To name a few, it could be achieving a certain net worth they're targeting, preparing for large expenses or material life events, maybe retiring by a certain age, and so on.
And keeping all of this in mind, it sounds like someone could maybe do this on their own, but do you think there's a huge risk in doing that if you're trying to create your own financial plan?
You could absolutely do a DIY financial plan on your own. You're right, though, it does come with certain risks. At a minimum, though, I'd say if you're not super disciplined with money already, it could very well be a worthwhile exercise simply just to get you thinking smarter and harder about your money and how you manage it. It is important to remember, too, that most of us tend to excel in life by forming a specialization. Right. For most of us watching today, I would suspect that that's our careers and our full-time job. And as we know, there's only so much time in the day. So if you have a full-time job and a family you're focused on, doing it on your own may not be the best path for you, as it could expose you to costly mistakes just due to lack of financial planning concepts already. So personal finance concepts, tax laws, investment strategies, they're all continuously evolving. And financial advisors exist because they live and breathe it. They're on top of it every single day so that you don't have to be if you don't have the means or time or energy.
Yeah, the most valuable currency is time. And I was going to make that point too. It's like, okay, we all have our strengths and our weaknesses. So maybe take a look to know what yours are. Do you think that you can appropriately make a plan for yourself? If not, that's why there are people that specialize in that. And you can lean on their expertise.
Yeah, and I like to use like a doctor, for example. If you break your arm, chances are you're probably not going to try and fix it yourself because you know that you can get better results from a doctor who's a specialist in it. And this is no different.
Yep. So, okay, now I know what a financial plan is, but can we go into why bother even making one?
Yeah, absolutely. So to start answering that, I'll just share that it's estimated that only about 35% of Americans have a financial plan. And those who don't might have cited reasons for not having one, such as they don't have enough time to do it, it seems too complicated, or it's not worth the cost of building one. Now, I'm of the strong belief that it can be far more expensive in the long term to you from an opportunity cost standpoint. Excuse me. If you don't have one, having one can help you avoid poor investment choices or strategies, missed opportunities, and just potentially wealth eroding mistakes. So why bother, right? So there's a company called Smart Asset that conducted a survey recently that concluded that one who begins working with a financial advisor to build a plan at age 25 years old is highly likely, and historical results have said they're going to end up with over a 200% higher net worth over their lifetime than if they never had a plan at all. And that holds true if you wait till 40 to start creating a financial plan, you're still very likely to increase your net worth by over 100% of what it would otherwise be without the plan.
Those are hard numbers to ignore. It's not like it's 5, 10, or another negligible amount. It's 200%. And even if you're starting at 40, which maybe some people feel like that's later in life, it's still a meaningful amount. So definitely very compelling.
Yeah. And really, I think we're all in this, right, to maximize our net worth and achieve our goals and desired lifestyle. And I want to be clear, though, having a plan, just because you make a plan doesn't mean that you're going to see results.
Yeah.
It takes discipline. You have to follow the plan. You have to stick with it, whether it's your savings, your investment, whatever it is. But a financial advisor is also going to be there to help you stay disciplined and keep you on track.
I'm glad you brought that up, because this week is a very, very good example of that. I'm sure there's tons of people that are biting their tongues, wanting to absolutely sell everything they have in their portfolio with the uncertainty going on with the tariffs and the global economy overall. So kind of what you were alluding to earlier, okay, great, you have a plan, but now how do you execute on that plan? And
Right.
maybe it could be a 2-part series where, okay, you have an advisor who makes a plan for you and then you execute it. Or I wouldn't really feel comfortable doing that. So maybe having the plan and then having someone holding you accountable, like you said.
Absolutely. Panic selling is a big no-no when it comes to investing.
Yeah, it's like you need a button to say, are you sure you want to do this? But thanks for giving us kind of just the bones of what a financial plan is. Now it would be great to like dig into the underlying components.
Yeah, of course. We've been pretty topical so far. Financial plans can come in all different shapes and sizes. They're not all alike. They can be very focused and only cover certain topics, or they can be more in depth. When one refers to a comprehensive financial plan, it's typically going to account for the individual or the family's full financial picture, all of their financial goals, risk tolerance, right? To provide them with recommended actions to take pertaining to cash flow and debt management, saving and investment, tax planning strategies, education savings, planning for major life events such as retirement, having kids, buying a house, getting your estate plan and trust and will documents in order, life insurance typically most applicable for those who have children already, and so on. But those are kind of the core components of a typical comprehensive financial plan.
So people's heads might be worrying. There's a lot of different components there. Which one do you think people should start with, or at like the bare bones minimum at least have?
Yeah. Cash flow and debt management. I didn't reference one, which is risk management. Are you prepared financially if something unforeseen happens? So financial planning as an exercise, it always starts with a calculation of what is your net worth and what are your cash flows? Where's the money coming from that's coming in? How much is going out, and where's it going to? If you don't have an emergency cash fund already, step one is to build an action plan to establish one that could support you for typically about 3 to 6 months of your living expenses. And that's not a blanket assumption. It really comes down to your individual circumstances. I've seen emergency funds smaller than 3 to 6 months of expenses, and I've seen them larger.
Yeah.
Now, once you have that in place, where you go from there from a financial planning standpoint, it just depends on where you're at in life, what your goals are, and what components I mentioned are most applicable for you. So to give an example, I'll just say if you're 30 years old, you're single, you're not married, you don't have children, you don't own a home. Most likely, life insurance and estate planning is not going to be applicable or on the front of your mind. On the other hand, you may be more focused on, are you saving enough? Is your investment portfolio diversified and optimized for your goals? Maybe that's long-term growth. You may be concerned about whether or not you're taking advantage of everything you can be to minimize your taxes. Or maybe you're planning to buy a house, right? How much of a house can you afford? Example 2 would be, say you're in your mid-40s, you're married, you have kids, you have a house. You've been pretty successful in building up some wealth over the years. Now, you're probably going to be more concerned about life insurance and estate planning to ensure your family and assets are protected, maybe making sure that you're on track to retire when you want and be able to afford your desired retirement lifestyle. I will say, too, is like when you think about, do I do this myself or do I work with an advisor? The beauty of working with an advisor is they're doing this every day. They've done a million of these plans. And so once they have an understanding of your full financial picture, they're very easily going to be able to point out the areas where you have the most meaningful opportunity for change or improvement to maximize your probability of achieving your goals.
Absolutely. And everyone is just at such a different stage. And some of this stuff isn't exactly fun to think about, like planning when you die, but it's essentially, it's very essential. And a bit of a nuanced question, just because it's a selfish question for me. When you're thinking about your emergency funds, how do you take into account your assets for that? Like, do you need to cover your assets, like just in case, or like maybe 50%? Or how would you think about that?
Yeah, so I think where your mind is at is more about estate planning and life insurance planning.
Mm-hmm.
To if you have a certain amount of assets or income that you want to protect, if I know it's morbid, but if you got hit by a bus tomorrow, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where the life insurance really comes into play. You did say that on like this is an emergency fund perspective.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the rule of thumb is to think about it less about how much assets you have, but more about what does it cost you to live? And do you have enough to give yourself a 3, 6, or maybe even longer month buffer if you lost your job tomorrow, you lost your income, or something of that nature happened? I'll tell you personally, I'm a 6-month cash emergency fund type individual.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my understanding too, but just wanted to make sure I wasn't thinking about that incorrectly.
Sure. No, you got
And
it.
you also mentioned tax planning. So can you give 1 or 2 pieces of advice around that specific type of plan?
Yeah. Tax planning is increasingly more and more important by the year. I'd say more broadly, first piece of advice, especially if you want to do your own financial plan on your own, is stay as up to date as possible on major changes to tax legislation. There could be big updates coming next year as the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is set to expire at the end of 2025. And nobody knows, the Trump administration wants to extend that. Nobody knows if that's going to happen or what's going to change. But what could come are brand new tax breaks that you may be able to take advantage of. But the first thing to do is to know they exist. Second piece of advice is a little more specific. If you're not self-employed and your employer offers you a Roth and K option, take advantage of it. Unlike a Roth IRA, there are no thresholds of income you make that can phase you out from being able to contribute to it. And there's really just not a more tax efficient and productive way to grow your wealth than a Roth. Because the post-tax, you do pay taxes, right, on the money before you contribute it. But then once it's in, it's going to grow and compound on a tax-free basis for the rest of your life until you spend it all. Almost like a QOZ fund.
Right. And so when you pull it out, if you pull it out early, for example, you still have to pay the penalty, right? But you don't have to pay the taxes on top of it.
You can pull your what you put in out before retirement without taxes or penalty, which is unique compared to a traditional 401k.
That is very unique. Yeah. To your point, a very good tool to take advantage of, but it has limits, right? Do you recall what that limit is?
In terms of how much you can take out before retirement?
In terms of what you can put in every year.
Yeah, so it changes every year, it grows with inflation. I believe the limit for a Roth 401k is roughly $23,000 in 2025. It could be slightly higher. I may be mixing 24 with 25.
It's still a meaningful amount. It's not like it's 7,000 or something around there.
Right. It is. And it's more than double, maybe even triple that of a annual Roth IRA contribution limit.
Yep. Yeah, definitely something that should be taken seriously. And I want to circle back to the examples that you gave, because you also said, okay, maybe this guy is ready for estate planning. So when would you say it's appropriate to start estate planning?
Yeah. A lot of people know the term, but they don't know what estate planning actually is or entails. And so I'll start with that. And it's really, estate planning is all about strategies to protect your assets from probate and protect your family and your finances in the event of an accident. Sorry to be morbid, but God forbid that leads to your death, or leaves you unable to make your own financial or health decisions, not only for yourself, but your family, right, over time. And so it's most appropriate to start thinking about estate planning very seriously once you have assets and have a family to protect and care for. You don't have to have the family, though. And a good example of this is, say you own a home, right? That is an asset. homes you can't add a beneficiary to your home like you can a brokerage account or a Roth IRA. So
Yeah.
if you suddenly passed away, right, your house is then going to go into probate, which is a lengthy and costly process. Then through that process, it's going to be determined who gets your house after you're gone and when they get it. So estate planning, for example, setting up a revocable trust and putting the home and any other assets like that in the revocable trust is going to be a written and documented plan that states exactly who gets what asset, what of your beneficiaries get what asset when you pass away and when they get them.
Again, it's not something that's exciting to think about, but if you don't have a plan in place, imagine if something happens to you and you don't have those contingencies, and then your family is just left scrambling. And I feel like I've heard so many stories where people get kind of weird with money, and like they feel entitled to certain things that they think that they have ownership of. So if you just kind of do that front work, I would encourage everyone today to just start thinking of that and just take one step to get closer to having that estate plan.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the whole thing in general is tough to stomach getting started with, given that largely most of it benefits your family, not you, right? After you're gone. And so if you want to serve your family well and not dump a mess on them and potentially create money issues between your children or heirs after you're gone, it's one of those things that it's very important to do, at a younger age when you're thinking about it and you do have the assets or people to care for.
Exactly. So now that we've kind of gone over what a financial plan is, the underlying components, such as like the tax planning and estate planning, what are some common mistakes you typically see when people first come to you?
Yeah. As an advisor, when someone first comes to me, I'd say most of the common mistakes are some of the easiest to fix or revert back, if you will. Things such as waiting too long to start saving and investing, not having an emergency fund at all, maybe investing without diversification or without a strategic asset allocation that could lead to significant risk and volatility of your investments. And then overpaying in taxes just due to lack of awareness of things you can be doing to be more efficient on that front.
Yeah, when you were talking, the concept of like broke millionaire came to my mind. So the person who has the nice clothes, the fancy car, but has absolutely nothing in their bank account. And so they're going to be way worse off as the years come, when everyone then is finally taking the time to do the things that they want to be doing. And then that broke millionaire is going to be suffering pretty badly.
Absolutely. The similar thing holds true if you're familiar with being house poor. If you overspend on a house above your means, just like overspending on a car or clothes or whatever, and then it's going to constrict your lifestyle significantly, until that house is paid off or sold.
Right. Yeah, good point. Absolutely not worth it. If you could give someone one piece of financial planning advice, what would it be?
Yeah. I love to borrow a quote from Warren Buffett for this one, and it's be greedy when others are fearful and be fearful when others are greedy. I'm sure you've heard it, but it kind of goes against a lot of people's intuition to follow the crowd or habits to follow the crowd, right? Putting that into example or context is, when investors get greedy in the stock market, right, they're piling into the stocks, they're bidding the price up, sometimes to the sky, right? And that's when you want to be fearful and not follow the crowd. Because as we know, huge, fast run-ups are typically followed by, declines or market plunges after that. So conversely, when the market is declining and there's widespread fear around and negativity around, right, that's when you want to get greedy and start buying.
It's like we were alluding to earlier in the conversation, it's so tough to hang on tight during those moments of volatility, but recessions make millionaires. So if you're just patient and are very attuned to what's going on, you just have that quote in the back of your mind and know that hopefully it will turn out for the best.
Yeah, you have to, because one of the most irrational things people do, because they let emotion get in the way of investing, which is very challenging not to do that, but they end up selling when the panic is there, right? And they're selling low, they're buying high and selling low, right? And as we know, that's the opposite of what you want to do.
Not a good strategy. And I do know that some people do it strategically for tax harvesting purposes or things like that, but you want to make sure that it is
Sure.
intentional and it's not an emotional decision.
Right. Yeah. Tax loss harvesting. Yeah. Whole different topic, but
Yeah.
you're right there.
Well, like I started off by saying, I did want to touch on Rise. So, just a few questions. First one that comes to my mind: what makes Rise different?
Yeah, so there's a few things, but I'll just stick to one that I'd say makes Rise the most unique, which is the longevity of the value proposition that my partner and I are providing to our clients. There are over 15,000 financial advisors in the US alone. And what a lot of people don't know or just don't really think about is that the average financial advisor is 55 years old today. Almost 25% of them are 65 years or older. And so you can do the math. That means the majority of financial advisors are either thinking about retirement, it's in their imminent future, or they might already have one leg out the door. And so when you're someone seeking out vetting financial advisors, do you really want to hire someone that, depending on your age, right, might not be there for you in a few years or might not be there for you in 10 years? And so conversely, my business partner, Tom, and I, we're both in our mid 30s. We're both millennials. We each have over a decade worth of experience and expertise in this area. We're offering the same things or better solutions than what I'll call the silver haired advisors out there. But unlike them, right, we've got 30 plus year runways to serve and grow alongside our clients, which becomes quite valuable to many as their wealth grows and they have more and more multi-generational wealth needs arise.
That's a good point, too, because I'm assuming once a wealth advisor gets to a retirement age, he's either selling his book off or just closing down shop altogether. And so neither of those really make me feel very comfortable in knowing what that strategy will be going forward. So
Right,
it's a good
because
one.
a big part of, if you choose to work with an advisor, a big part of your decision is most likely going to come down to who do you enjoy working with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the prerequisites have to be there, the expertise, the solutions, the knowledge, right? But yeah, if you hire someone and then all of a sudden 5 years later they're gone, right? That leaves you in a position where you're working with someone you might not like, or you might have to take the time to go through the whole process again and find a new one.
Right. Absolutely. Another question I had is you've had a really successful career and now going from W-2 employee to founder is very different. So why did you start Rise?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I was fortunate in my mind to have realized at a young age in high school that investing in the pursuit of achieving financial freedom was a strong passion of mine. Pursued it through college education, master's degree, right? I started Rise in 2019 as a means to love what I do every day, right? It's my passion, and not only help myself in doing so, but help others in achieving their own financial goals and financial freedom.
That's awesome. Looking at your crystal ball that we all wish we had, what is your strategy as you look forward into 2025?
Yeah. From an investment standpoint.
Right.
Yeah. So obviously I don't have the crystal ball either. I have an educated take and a robust amount of investment diversification in this environment is more important than ever. I'm talking diversification beyond big tech, beyond the S&P 500, and even beyond the borders of the US. It is our belief at Rise that the next decade is unlikely to look like the last, which was dominated by big tech, US stocks, and just the general belief of American exceptionalism. So historically, the US versus international stocks tend to outperform each other, right? And the outperformance cycles on average have lasted about 8 years each over history. But today, we're almost 14 years in to the current cycle of US outperformance. As a lot of us probably know, history repeats itself. And when it comes to the stock market, there's always a reversion to the mean. So, word of caution, if you don't believe that, or maybe if you're someone today that is really overly concentrated to big technology companies, or maybe invest all your money into an S&P 500 index fund, I'll just say, think about that. You don't want to wake up and be caught swimming naked after it's already too late to make changes and diversify yourself a little bit more.
And how is foreign stock taxed to us? Is there heavier tax implications? Is it the same, or how does that work?
It could vary, but generally speaking, if you're a passive investor, and there are certain stocks like called ADRs, right, that are American traded shares of foreign companies that might come with certain commissions. But there shouldn't be any different tax implications if you don't get too fancy with it.
Got it. Awesome. Well, thanks, Vince. Let me end with my fire round. First question is, what is your favorite restaurant?
This one I get a lot, actually. And you may know this one from your Chicago days. So I live in a neighborhood called Lincoln Park in Chicago. And there is a restaurant called the Armitage Ale House, which is my favorite. You've been, yeah?
I actually haven't been, but I've heard of it.
Okay. It's a very cozy, kind of intimate, small restaurant. Fantastic aesthetic, though. And they serve what they call high quality pub fare. My go-tos are their chicken pot pie, steak frites, and they also have one of Chicago's best burgers. And one of my favorite parts of the restaurant, hands down, though, is that they're one of few restaurants in downtown Chicago that has an active wood-burning fireplace, which they run in the middle of the dining room.
That is so cool.
It's a nice, cozy feel.
Yeah. Well, I know where I'm going next time I go to Chicago.
Make the reservation early.
Yes, no kidding. Second question, what is your favorite way to stay up to date on the news?
So I stick to business news as much as I can. I do my best to stay away from news outlets that tend to be the most heavily politically biased in either direction, in the effort of avoiding misinformation as much as I can. And so when it comes to more topical, broader news, think the Wall Street Journal, maybe Barron's, Market Watch. And then when it's like more industry specific news, maybe Bloomberg, and then various asset manager research studies to stay on top of the market and market trends.
Perfect. Last question. What is a book you'd recommend to someone just starting out on their financial journey?
For those who haven't already read it, many may have, but it would be my top recommendation still. There's a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Guy Kiyosaki. I read it myself in Personal Finance 101 my freshman year in college. And the book just goes into debunking the myth that you need to have a very high income to build wealth. Because to your point earlier, I think high income doesn't build wealth if you spend it all or don't use it the right way. And so the book explains how to make changes to stop working for money, but rather start having your money work for you.
Yep.
Which is an underpinning concept of financial wealth building in general.
Well, there's a reason it comes up time and time again. It's just one of those timeless books that can really change your perspective.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Well, Vince, this was an amazing conversation. Why and how should people reach out to you?
You can reach out to me if you want to chat, if you want to talk about financial planning, pick my brain, whatever it is. You can connect with me. The easiest way would be directly on LinkedIn. Fun fact, I'm the only VinceDeCrow on LinkedIn.
That's
so
impressive.
It should be pretty easy to find. If you want to learn more about Rise in general, you could also visit our website, which is riseinvestmentsusa.com.
Perfect. Well, I hope people have a greater sense of the importance of financial planning and maybe a first few steps to get started. Until next time, adios.
Likewise. Bye, Bella.
If you are ever interested in a recap with the main points discussed throughout the podcast episode, check out the Q&A series because we dig deeper into the concepts discussed, and you can follow along on YouTube if that's preferred. If you find any value in this show and want to support it, it would be awesome if you texted someone right now about it. You can say you have a podcast recommendation that you think they should listen to and then ask them to get back to you with their thoughts. Anything helps, and I really rely on the amazing investors like you to spread the word. Thank you so much for listening, and please feel free to reach out at any time.